nurses, doctors and checkout operators had the courage to turn up, even when they were petrified. The lesson is character and courage emerge out of trauma and hardship. The question for any generation of political leaders is, have we had the courage and character to step up and solve the hard economic and social issues of our time? I hope that I have done my bit to step up. I hope that I stepped up as a Member of Parliament for Auckland Central and as a Cabinet Minister. 12 years ago, winning the seat and becoming the first national Auckland Central MP in our country's history was one of the best nights of my life, but also challenging in breaking up with my boyfriend of 5 years. In that week, I learned that not everybody wants to be the spouse of an MP, but also that the life of a good MP comes with duty, responsibility and extraordinary sacrifice. Many in this chamber know the price of power, as do their families. I want to take a moment to thank my family who are here, Mum, Neil, Sue. I'm not going to name everybody else because they're quite a large family. Thank you for all that you have done in my life. As I said the other day, I have spent most of my adult life in this place serving New Zealand. That means that I have been an absent auntie, sister and daughter at times, but I am coming home. You know I can't cook, clean or drive very well, so please be patient with me. I still want to change the world, so I'm going to pull that card if things cut up rough. It is the toughest moments of my personal life that have helped me be able to be a better Member of Parliament and Cabinet Minister. Through my parents breaking up young, a stepbrother being charged with murder, being diagnosed with breast cancer at 36, I have learned when your world breaks and shatters, you can be your most powerful. Random strangers in the role reach out and pick you up. Thank you to the many New Zealanders who, through their messages, picked me up. My ability to help people in Auckland Central for 12 years to reach into their hearts and homes comes from this experience. Good ministers come from all walks of life. They can be teachers, doctors, solo mums, but they all must have good judgment, a capacity to solve problems, and a perseverance for people and policy, which means they deliver. 4 terms in Auckland Central, beating Judith, our current Prime Minister, and Helen, was won through hard work and knocking on doors, a clarity of purpose and projects in the electorate, and a core group of dedicated and passionate volunteers who I wish to acknowledge this evening. Paul Beattie, my electorate chair of more than a decade, thank you. You and Donna have been loyal rocks through many a storm. Katie and Evan, my spiritual mentors. Chris, thank you for your blue-green vision. Brad, Annie, Helen, Josh, Hamish, Tim, Jonathan, Jessie, Jim, Jan, Sharon and Barry, each of you have given so much. Thank you. Michelle, while I had no knowledge or involvement relating to COVID data, what occurred was unacceptable and you have taken responsibility and apologised. I still recognise that some people make terrible mistakes, but still she has given decades of political and charitable service to our nation. To Judy Wrightson, you have been a bright light and a crucial cog in our victory. In my maiden speech when I first came to Parliament, I said, I believe in freedom, hard work, determination, courage and an ability to question and challenge and a commitment to help those who are most in need. I also talked about the importance of our environment being the greatest asset that we have as a country. I told my electorate I would be a Liberal who fought for freedom, a blue-green who would fight for the environment, and someone who would continue to fight for those disadvantaged while persevering for a more modern and dynamic country. My office has served not just my constituents, but thousands of businesses and community organisations. As a constituency MP, I have enjoyed the many wins where you can fundamentally change the course of people's lives with a letter or a phone call. There have also been heartbreaking moments where you can't make change. Many people in this chamber know those moments. The moment, such as explaining to a man dying of cancer and his wife that Pharmac was not going to fund a life-saving drug. It is out of these moments of sadness that you fight harder in the caucus room. New Zealand has the capacity to have a stronger democracy than other countries because of the accessibility and accountability that can exist in politicians in a small nation. I am proud of the people I've helped, from long-term rough sleepers, people who have been suicidal, families torn apart by immigration. However, there are constituency cases that stick out. One involved me helping a young New Zealand girl stuck in Japan near a nuclear accident post the tsunami. The short version is that with some advocacy via Murray McCully and MFAT in a dramatic race against time, we got her and a young Australian girl in what I think was one of the last taxis to Tokyo. I think if New Zealanders knew more about the stories of politicians helping people, our democracy would be much stronger. Recent events are not a true reflection of the calibre of many of the parliamentarians that walk these halls. As I have said, our environment is the greatest asset that we have as a country. Whether it has been my opposition to my own party's proposals of mining on Great Barrier, which saw thousands of people marching down Queen Street, or progressing marine protection in the Hauraki Gulf, I have fought for my party and my country to do more for our environment inside and outside the caucus room. People still cross the street to thank me for stopping the mining of their batches in the Coromandel and Great Barrier. Years later, it was a great moment to be able to advocate and help secure a conservation park for the island, which will see Aucklanders enjoy this jewel for generations to come. I want to acknowledge Izzy Fordham and Paul Downey for their work for the island. I've often said to people, being the MP for Great Barrier when things go wrong, there is no army of public servants. There is the MP, the chair of the local board, and the community. The island is resilient and resourceful. I'm proud to have delivered investment in communications infrastructure, secured funding for the Aotea Learning Hub, provided greater access to bursary payments for children off island. I've also opposed marine dumping near the island, and I hope that the next MP can carry on the work done around marine protection. I have loved the people of the Barrier for their authentic and pragmatic approach to solving issues. The island is one of my many families, my spiritual home, and where I will live for a large part of my life. In central Auckland, the Western Bays, I've supported a number of projects, including securing over $150 million in the redevelopment of Freeman's Bay Schools, Bayfield School, Western Springs College. In transport, I advocated for the $300 million Victoria Park Tunnel delivered under National, the Urban Cycleway investment, and for many years, the approval of the City Rail Link, a game-changer artery for the beating heart of Auckland. Thank you to Stephen Joyce, Simon Bridges and other transport ministers for your work on these many projects. I want to acknowledge City Missioners Chris Farrelly, Diane Robertson and Moira from LifeWise. I've supported organisations such as the City Mission to secure additional wraparound support through the Housing First program. I've also advocated for the national government to provide significant funding for the Homeground project, which is being built at the moment and will see additional accommodation and services for vulnerable people who are homeless in Auckland. I've been passionate about apartment law reform and spent several years working with the legal and property professionals to develop a 30-page statute which is currently progressing through Parliament. It is essential that this unit titles bill passes if we want to prevent the next leaky buildings. To the people of Waiheke, to the Republic of Waiheke, you've been about a quarter of my constituency cases. Thank you for your vocal and powerful force of nature. I'm proud to have secured over $40 million for the redevelopments of Te Hirahi and Waiheke High School. I've advocated for greater viability of ferry services and helped retain funding for continued free travel alongside Winston Peters for oldies to go to Waiheke on their Super Gold Card. I petitioned Parliament to oppose the accommodation provider targeted rate tax. I've fought for fairer ferry fares and greater accountability of services. I want to now take this moment to acknowledge all of my electorate staff, Rita, Maggie, Amy, Sam, Alex, Elliot, Shelley, Angie and Rochelle, for all of the work that you've done. But to Maggie Bowman, thank you for the more than a decade of service that you have given to the people of Auckland Central. We have seen it all. Pee addicts, mental health incidents, we've been taped, we've had police incidents, we've had burglaries. Auckland Central is a hotbed for sometimes some of the hardest social issues in New Zealand. Thank you to Auckland Central. It's been a privilege to be your MP. In my time in Parliament, I've also fought for freedom. I've always tried to be a strong advocate for freedom and personal liberty. I feel proud to have followed a line of inspirational and liberal Nats, from Catherine Rich to Simon Power, Jim Macleay, Marilyn Waring to Chris Finlayson. I've helped keep the flame alive in our caucus alongside my friend Amy Adams. It has been through conscience issues and working in a collaborative way across the House with people from different political parties that I have fought the cause. I voted and worked with parliamentarians from different political parties to help support legislation to enable people to marry who they love. Thank you, Lewissa Wall, for your mahi on this issue. Through my work as Minister for Youth, I supported funding for organisations such as Rainbow Youth to get their first contract to prevent bullying of young people. I've also worked with colleagues to enable changes to decriminalise abortion and to pass the end-of-life choice legislation. I know that as Amy and I leave the Liberal wing of the National Party, it will burn brightly with colleagues such as Nicola, Chris and Erica fighting for freedom. The National Party has been a strong force in New Zealand politics because of its values of freedom and personal responsibility, a place where social conservatives and social liberals can work for the common good. As a party, we are at our best when there is balance. That is when we are truly representative of this great nation. One of the worst things that you can do when you get that call to become a Cabinet Minister is to have your battery run out. This is what happened to me, but I called John Kaye back. It was a baptism of fire as a new minister dealing with our largest food safety scare in our nation's history within a few months of being sworn in. When I found out from MPI at 5 o'clock in Canterbury about the potential presence of botulinum in milk powder, I thought that I would be a very short-serving minister. It was a very scary time. Alongside my colleagues, I had to envisage the possibility of babies dying at home and abroad and a destruction to our economy. In those weeks, I saw the very best of Stephen Joyce. I saw the very best of Bill English, of Tim Grosser, of Nathan Guy and John Kaye. It was a challenging situation. I acknowledge all the MPI officials for their work. Miriam Dean, thank you for your stunning independent review. Thank you, Nathan, for all that you did. As Minister, I went on to deliver food safety legislative reform. However, the scare did see me have dinner with the PM and the President of China. I remember feeling enormous pride, John, in watching you as a Prime Minister of a small nation have a genuine and warm relationship of respect with the President of China. It is a testament to you. As Minister of ACC, I was proud to have overseen significant levy cuts, in part due to the good work of Nick Smith. I succeeded in proposing ACC legislation designed to enable greater stability and certainty around ACC levies, which I hope has provided benefits to many small businesses. But it has been the civil defence portfolio that kept me awake at nights, from floods to cyclones to earthquakes. I remember receiving a phone call around an earthquake in the Kermadex. It is in those moments as Minister of Civil Defence that you wait to find out whether a wave is coming towards New Zealand. It was then very important to me, when I experienced that, to push for an early warning system. I fought hard to secure funding for the cell alert system, which in my view will highly likely save thousands of lives in the future of our country. Thank you to Sarah Stewart-Black and all of the Civil Defence staff for the work that you do. But my love and passion has been in education. I became Associate Minister to Waiheke Parata, who I believe is one of the greatest serving ministers of education in our nation's history. Waiheke, you achieved so much. You oversaw a huge lift in achievement for Māori and Pacifica students. You had an absolute commitment to excellence. As Associate Minister, I helped to try and improve school infrastructure. We did condition assessments of schools right across New Zealand. We took the school infrastructure budget from $3.5 billion to $5 billion. And it was a testament to John and Heke's leadership that in the middle of the global financial crisis, we secured $200 million to connect all schools in New Zealand to uncapped fast internet connections. This was about unlimited learning. This was about ensuring that young people were not disadvantaged by geography in this country. In 2016, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And as I've said before, my world broke. I tried to resign, and the only reason that I was able to become Minister of Education was that John Kaye, as I cried my eyes out, said, "You're not fucking going anywhere." I became the Minister of Education 3 months prior to the election period. I was proud to carry out Hekia's work, getting a cabinet decision to scrap the decile system within 2 years. Many communities are stigmatised by this system. There is a poverty of expectation that must be removed. I signed off the digital technologies curriculum as Minister, and in the last few years I've had the privilege to travel the country and work with Chris Hipkins on NCEA reform and tomorrow's schools. We do not agree with all of the proposals, but I acknowledge Minister Hipkins for trying to collaborate and compromise to get a better result. It was very touching on the morning that it was reported that I was going to retire that you told me not to do it. I think you learn in those moments that you can fight on policy and ideas but form friendships across the House. Thank you for what you do, Minister. I now want to talk about being Deputy Leader of the party. And a few comments about leadership. I backed Amy for the leadership because I believed in her character and her work ethic. All leaders and Prime Ministers have a superpower, in my view. Helen Clark, her intellect, John Kaye, his confidence and his optimism, Jacinda, her communication and charisma, Bill English, his intellect and EQ, Simon Bridges, his work ethic. I backed Todd for leadership because I believe in him and I believe in his capacity to set a vision for New Zealand that was blue-green, bold, fair and outward-looking for our nation. It was a very short time in the role, but I still believe in you, Todd. Regardless of what the papers have written, I do not believe what occurred was predictable or preventable. It was a privilege to be your Deputy Leader and to the National Party. I expect in time Todd will tell his story, but can I say this to Amelia, Bradley and Amy and Michelle? You can be very proud of your husband and father. With outbreak, though, comes opportunity. Judith, I hope that you become our next Prime Minister. You're strong and you have huge conviction. We are facing the largest economic crisis of a generation. New Zealand needs a national government, and I will campaign harder than anyone else for that to happen. Now to the future. I may be off for a hippie for a while, but I wanted to leave you with some thoughts. We must, as a nation, value education more. Last year, we released an education discussion document. It talked about incentives for people to go into teaching, to stay into teaching, changes to teacher training, additional support for children with complex needs, and of course supporting children in their first 1,000 days of life. Recently, I was a Lee Kuan Yew Fellow, and I reflected on the need for New Zealand to become lifelong learners. National has proposed education accounts as an option for more people to be upskilled throughout their life. COVID provides this burning platform for large-scale upskilling of the nation and a change in culture where we must value education more. We must continue to break down the barriers to online learning. Children in parts of New Zealand can have access to subjects, qualifications and teachers like never before. We must continue to tackle disadvantage. Bill English built the machine of social investment. But what we do around children with complex needs will mean that there are young people that are less truant, more people in work and less people in prison. We must continue to value our environment more, save our species, reduce emissions, improve our water. There is so much to do. I hope that one day we have an environmental party that will rust on with the left and the right in this parliament. It was a sad day when we lost the Māori Party. Dame Tariana Tuia is someone that I admire greatly, and I hope that we continue to involve our treaty partnership. One of the reasons I progressed second language learning in schools was about ensuring that Te Reo thrives and other languages are supported for our heritage. To the National Party, you are my family. I'm grateful to have always been blue, past presidents, the board, the leaders of the party and our members. I joined the party at 19, and I joined because I believe in equality of opportunity. You have given me so much opportunity. Thank you to my national friends and family. To the parliamentarians, I've always said I believe there are two types of parliamentarians in this place, those that are in it for themselves and those that are in it for the country. Be the latter. Be brave and have courage. Don't leave anything in the tank. I've been fortunate to be supported by a number of strong, smart and caring women, Jenny Shipley, Ruth Richardson, Catherine Rich and Amy Adams. Each of you have been so generous with your time and wisdom in critical moments where I needed a dose of courage and compassion. To the parliamentarians, don't be arrogant or entitled. This is public service. I have been proud to have been a public servant of New Zealand. I love our country and I hope to continue to contribute more in the future. Haere rā.
Order. Can I now ask the guests of the Honourable Nikki Kaye to leave by those exits? Thank you. Open the door and let them in. They're meant to be up there and the door's not even open. I just don't understand why they're not coming in.
Nobody recognises it.
Excuse me, can I ask the staff there to open the door and let people in, please? I spent some time, well, unless there's no one there, I can't see anyone there, maybe they're all in. I call on the Honourable Amy Adams to make her valedictory statement.
Mr Speaker, in rising to make my valedictory statement, I feel every bit as humbled and as privileged as I did when I rose to make my maiden speech from the very back row of this chamber 12 years ago. It's always seemed to me that time has its own rules in this place. My maiden speech feels both just like yesterday and at the same time a whole lifetime ago. I battled my emotions during that speech, and I give the House fair warning that I'm highly likely to succumb again tonight. I remember giving a pretty emotional speech in the general debate shortly after the first major earthquake had devastated much of Canterbury, and losing the battle on that occasion not to cry in this House. As I tried to get a grip on myself, I recall Hone Harawera yelling out, "Kia kaha, sister." And I remember thinking, holy cow, if Hone is feeling sorry for a Tory like me, I really must be a mess. I spent a good portion of my maiden speech casting back to some of the debates and the battle for women's suffrage that reflected on the benefits that women members would bring to politics. And I'm incredibly proud and actually quite shocked to find that I was just the 98th woman member in New Zealand's history to become an MP. Over my time as an MP, I've tried to use the role to encourage more women to see their futures without limits, and to push back on the still unlevel playing field. As any woman in this place can tell you, we continue to face a type of scrutiny and criticism that is unique to us, and often a different measure of competence. While the number of women in politics is growing, we still have some way to go. But as MPs, we have the ability to model possibilities for so many New Zealanders, and that's something we should never lose sight of. One of my proudest moments came 5 years after I'd been asked to give a speech to the seniors at my old high school, Rangitoto College. I talked about the fact that I'd never won a prize of any sort at school, and while I'd done okay, I certainly wasn't someone who was marked out for bigger things. Years later, a woman came up to me and told me that she'd been in the audience that day, and after hearing me, she decided she would go to law school too. She just graduated, and she came up to thank me for making her believe that she could. I have to say I was lost for words that our stories could have such an impact, but they do. Mr. Speaker, I've never really seen myself as a politician. I didn't come from a political family. I wasn't a youth MP. I wasn't a member of a youth wing of any party, nor did I study political science or work in the halls of power before coming here as a member. My path to this place grew out of a deep love of my country and an overriding sense of optimism of what being a New Zealander could and should mean for everyone. After my children were born, I found myself increasingly thinking about what their futures in New Zealand looked like and worrying when I thought we as a country were getting it wrong. I grew up in a household where sitting on the sidelines complaining simply wasn't an option. If you thought something was wrong, you had two choices. You could suck it up, or you could do something about it. So the opportunity to step into the ring and try and make a difference became everything. Standing for Parliament and nailing my political colours to the mast was one of the scariest things I have ever done in my life. It involves doing that very un-Kiwi thing of stepping forward and saying out loud, you think you're good enough. But it has been, without question, one of the best decisions of my life. I have to say that I started my time as an MP in a relatively bizarre way, and I've seen it end in a somewhat similarly unusual way. My selection and initial election involved a candidate being selected for the seat, then unselected after a public furore, then a new process being commenced, then a High Court injunction, and finally a rare Electoral Act challenge based on a disgruntled aspirant challenging the party rules. After a hearing before a panel of judges in the High Court in Christchurch, which some of my colleagues will remember for a number of reasons you can ask them about later, I had to come to a question time early in my first term to listen to the Speaker deliver the judgment of the court without any idea how the court had ruled, and knowing that if the applicant had won, then the Sergeant-at-Arms would be called upon to eject me, and I would have had one of the shortest terms as an MP ever. I have to say that keeping a poker face while the judgment was being read involved acting skills my famous namesake would have been proud of. After a beginning like that, it's only fitting that the end of my time as an MP has also been somewhat non-traditional. It's always good to hold some of the firsts in this place, and I'm pretty sure that I'm the first MP to have retired, unretired, and then re-retired, all without actually leaving. When I told my son a few weeks ago that I would be announcing I was stepping down, he said, "Okay, thanks for the update, Mum, just let me know when you unretire again." It was a bit harsh, Tom, but I do admit that I must seem a little bit like the AJ Hackett of New Zealand politics. Michael Cullen described a valedictory as like being asked to give the oration at your own funeral, and I have to say it does feel a little bit like that. It's a surprisingly uncommon thing to be able to say you are going at your own time, of your own choosing, and in recent times particularly, to know that you leave with your reputation and your integrity intact. I've been here for less time than some, but for longer than most, and I've been fortunate to hold a vast number of roles, including holding 13 ministerial roles over 6 years around the cabinet table. I do have one perspective, though, that those of you who are staying on don't yet have, and that's of being in the position to reflect back on my time here as I think about what really matters when you come to say goodbye. That reflection puts our work here in a different light. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, the relentless news cycles, the parliamentary skirmishes, the never-ending papers to read, and the palace intrigue. Years can pass like that, filled with unbelievable hours of hard work, little sleep, and high stress, But that's not why any of us come to Parliament. Simon Power, who was an MP I greatly admired, said in his valedictory, "People don't spend years getting elected, more years waiting to get into cabinet to then say, well, I managed that week well, I minimised risk, I had no view, I took no decisions, I stayed out of trouble, well done me." Once you're in office, you've got to do something. People come and go, but ideas endure, and I agree with that. In the words of Teddy Roosevelt, I have a horror of words that are not translated into deeds, of speech that does not result in action. None of us should measure our contribution here by our goals, our hopes, or how much public money we spend in pursuit of them. The only measure that counts is the difference that our actions ultimately make for people. It's not good enough just to deliver a program if that program doesn't actually make the difference it was supposed to. In my view, we don't spend enough time as a system looking back and answering those sorts of questions. I don't think anyone leaves this place without some things left undone, and I have plenty of things I would have liked to achieve, including, Mr. Speaker, I'll admit to you now, a secret desire to have been thrown out of this chamber. There is still time, however.
3 more days.
But for all the things not done, there are many more that I do reflect on with pride. The Parliamentary Library tells me that I was responsible for the introduction or carriage of 74 pieces of legislation, each one of which I reflect on with pride, and as far as I know, none of which have yet been repealed. But you'll be very pleased to know I'm not going to list them. Legislation aside, there are a few things that I've been part of here that I do want to mention. In my 3 years as Justice Minister, it very quickly became clear to me that the best thing we could do to reduce crime was to intervene many, many years before the offenders ever turn up in court. That was the basis of my absolute adoption of the importance of social investment as championed by Sir Bill English. Yes, it's early intervention, but it's so much more and involves radical change to our delivery models if we're going to make progress on the hard intergenerational issues. Last week in her valedictory, the Honourable Anne Tolley talked about the work that she and I had led to change the delivery model for family violence and to force agencies to come together to treat it as everyone's problem, not just something for the police. The integrated safety response pilots we set up in Christchurch and the Waikato are embodiments of that. And hearing from those involved that many lives have been saved as a result of that new way of working makes me incredibly proud. As Environment Minister, putting in place comprehensive environmental protections for our exclusive economic zone, delivering New Zealand's first ever national standards for fresh water, and mandating regular independent environmental reporting feels like substantial pieces of work to have been involved in that critical area. In my maiden speech, I extolled the importance of long-term thinking and planning when it comes to the infrastructure needs of New Zealand. And in my longest-held ministerial post, I was fortunate to play a central role in providing better internet connectivity across New Zealand. To me, good internet connectivity is a great leveller, both for New Zealanders looking to trade globally and domestically across our communities. Our UFB, RBI and mobile black spot programs were transformative in that regard, and I want to acknowledge Sir John Key and Stephen Joyce for their vision and commitment in that area. I'll never forget visiting a tiny school on Great Barrier Island with John and Nikki Kaye to launch the connectivity upgrade there and watching a group of gifted students being able to study astronomy via remote learning. Or listening to the story of a small baby on the west coast of the South Island being able to be quickly diagnosed and treated in their local medical clinic by specialists at Christchurch Hospital through their dedicated fibre link. Of course, those stories were just a taste of what that vision and investment will mean for New Zealand for many generations to come. And didn't we see that during the COVID lockdown when we all worked from home? One of the amazing things about being an MP is getting to experience parts of New Zealand life we wouldn't otherwise get to see. When I became the MP for Selwyn, and knowing that my area included Burnham Military Camp, I realised that I also knew absolutely nothing about our Defence Forces, so I decided to go about changing that. During my first term, I convinced the Minister of Defence to let me set up a New Zealand equivalent of the UK Parliamentary Defence Forces scheme that saw MPs embedded with either Army, Air Force or Navy for a week, in uniform and living on base. And as the guinea pig, I did a rotation with each service, and I have to say they're experiences I will never forget. Now, I'm a massive coward when it comes to all things adrenaline. I scream on Ferris wheels. It's really embarrassing. I never thought I would skydive, and yet my week with the Air Force saw me throw myself out of a plane at 12,000 feet, The only thing that made me do it was knowing that there were 2 bloody Labour MPs in the plane with me, and I was damned if I was going to wimp out in front of them. During my Navy stint on the IPV Pukaki, I got to see a man overboard drill. When the man went over, I was somewhat startled to hear the command go up, "Get the rifles!" I commented to the captain that seemed a pretty harsh consequence for falling overboard, to be reassured by him that the weaponry was for the sharks and not the sailor. Those experiences left me absolutely blown away by the dedication of our Defence Force personnel. And in 2017, when I was given the honour of speaking for New Zealand at the dawn service at Anzac Cove in Gallipoli alongside Julie Bishop, and I heard the stories of those young men and saw the countless grave markers, I came to understand what true public service really means. So other than my first and last speeches in this chamber, 4 other speeches stand up particularly in my memory. The speech post the 2010 earthquake that I've already mentioned, giving the final speech in the passing of the recent abortion law changes, talking about the death of my own mother during the euthanasia debate, and giving the apology of this Parliament to those men unjustly convicted of loving who they love as part of expunging historical convictions for homosexuality. In each case, the emotion was real and it was difficult, but they are all speeches that needed to be made to be true to who I was. Colleagues, the jobs we hold matter. They matter so much more than any one of us. We need good people to want to step into this arena, and we need them to do it for the best of reasons. I worry that increasingly the scorn and the vitriol that is heaped on politicians, often fairly, discourages those good people from stepping up. These jobs are tough, the life is brutal, and the public will never really see the hours, the stress, the impossibility of the perfection that is required, and the impact that life in the public eye has on our families. While you are here in your political role, it is your life. Friends, family, and our health get what's left over, and often that's not much. But this job deserves that level of devotion. Hunter S. Thompson once said about politics that it is a cruel and shallow money trench, a long plastic hallway where thieves and pimps run free and good men die like dogs. And there's also a negative side. We all, as MPs, face the same personal challenges and upheavals as the rest of the population. But we quickly learn that we have to put on our public faces no matter what our internal turmoil, and that can take a toll. In my time in this House, I have dealt with the death of both of my parents and my 2 remaining grandparents. I've witnessed the devastation in my electorate through the Canterbury earthquakes, the Port Hills fire, and more recently the mosque shootings. I've received death threats and abuse, and I've seen my children have to deal with the relentless negativity and lies that are aimed at us through the media and social media alike. And yet not for a moment do I think it all hasn't been worth it. I want to quote from Teddy Roosevelt again. "It is not the critic that counts. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by the dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold, timid souls who know neither victory or defeat." If we're honest, though, none of us get the chance to be in this arena and dare greatly without the incredible support of a huge number of people, and I'm honoured to have so many of those people here with me today. I want to start, of course, by thanking my electorate of Selwyn, and to all its incredible communities, from Akaroa to Arthur's Pass, from Rolleston to Rakaia. What an honour it has been to represent you. Being chosen to be your voice in Parliament for 12 years has truly been a privilege. My thanks to the 3 electorate chairmen I've worked with, the late John Skinner, Frank Bremuel and John Sunkel. Thanks to all of the incredible members and volunteers who have been with me and given extraordinary service. I couldn't possibly name you all, but you have been like a second family to me. To all my staff across 12 years, you made me look far better than I actually was. In Selwyn and in Wellington, what an incredible team you were. I particularly think back to the times we had as a minister and some of the hilarity that included. Thank you in particular for stopping me one day sending out a letter which had intended to call for a meeting with the iwi leaders, but which autocorrect had helpfully changed to request a meeting with the ISIS leaders. That could have been somewhat interesting. It might It might have been easier, I'm not sure. The professionalism, laughter and support of you all and all of the officials I had the privilege of working with made every day a pleasure. And any successes that I've had in this job, I share with each one of you. There are two staff in particular, though, who need special mention and my deepest thanks. Sharon O'Callaghan, who has run my electorate office for every single day of those 12 years like an absolute boss, and Karen Hoare, who has been my phenomenal EA and SPS in Wellington for almost as long. These two are legendary, and quite simply, you are the best in the business. I thank you. Thank you to the National Party for giving me incredible opportunities, to Party President Peter Goodfellow and the board, to all the leaders I've served under, and to our tireless Regional Chairman Roger Bridge, my thanks. To my caucus colleagues, present and former, what a group of minds you are. I've been so lucky to be able to debate and collaborate with you. I've made some incredible friends, particularly in my 2008 year group, in a way that can only be formed by sharing such a big part of your life over so many years. Go well, all of you. A special thank you also to Sir John Kaye for taking a chance on a stroppy young backbencher from Canterbury and for being an inspiration to me every single day that you served in office. When I started here as a young, fresh-faced MP, I thought it was highly likely that the Prime Minister wouldn't really have a clue who I was. Just a few months into my first term, I found out that he certainly did, when I stepped onto the treadmill in the Parliament gym early one morning, only to find it had been left going at warp speed by the previous user. And I found myself jettisoned through the air, swearing like a sailor, to land quite literally at John's feet while he was doing weights. He looked down at me somewhat bemused, smiled and said, "Are you right, Amy? Be a bit careful, our ACC budgets are tight." I can tell you I don't recommend it as a way to improve name recognition. To my wider parliamentary colleagues, most of you I have come to respect and enjoy, even though I usually thought you were utterly wrong. The best of this House is when it acts with its humanity taking precedence over its politics, and I've been lucky enough to see that on many occasions. To my family, my mother and father were both here with me at the beginning. Whew. Now you've got to tell me to harden up, not breathe. But you are no longer, and I miss you both. To my siblings, Belinda, Ingrid and Cam, and your partners and kids, my amazing in-laws, my uncles, aunts and cousins, you all mean the world to me. Finally, my husband Don, and my two children, Tom and Lucy. As everyone in this chamber knows, you guys serve in these roles as much as we do, but you don't get any choice in the matter. Tom and Lucy, you were 8 and 10 when I started this journey, and you're both now in your 20s. I'm sorry I missed so much along the way, but you've turned into the most incredible people. I'm very proud of you. Don, for someone who hates any sort of public attention, you'll hate this. So how you put up with my political life is a mystery. I am sorry I refused your very kind offer to write this speech for me. But I really didn't think we could afford the legal bills or the counselling for the Hansard staff if they'd had to transcribe that, so I didn't take that option. If I have any advice for those who follow me, it would be pretty simple. Do the right thing and let the politics take care of itself. Be brave, stand up on the divisive issues, and never lose sight of the difference you get to make in the time that we are here. For me, I head off with no regrets, with immense pride, and now with the rare delight of being able to express an opinion without having to get 54 others to agree with it first. This place and these jobs matter. Go well. Kia kaha, kia maia, kia manawanui, ka kite anō.
Can I now thank the guests of the Honourable Amy Adams?